Welcome to the Stop Digging Community Podcast, powered by the nonprofit A² Lamp Groups. I'm Christina, a joyful founding board member since 2014. Your truly unique self-development journey begins today with the first step. Stop digging.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Stop Digging Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Neerum. I know I say this all the time, but I'm genuinely excited about our guest today. He also shares a passion for leadership and cultural development. He calls it organizational health. It's about creating great organizations. He's got a really interesting background. Some of the things that I really liked about you, Bryan, is that you've done some science, like you've done some kind of peer-reviewed writings. And that, I think, adds just a lot of credibility to it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my guest today, Bryan Hughes. Bryan, please tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into this.
Sure, Chris. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so it's one of those odd journeys. I originally went to college way back in the day to be a music teacher. And as I was doing my student teaching, I realized that the bureaucracy would just kind of sack any joy. And so I switched gears and went into business, initially into sales and then into management. And I've worked for all kinds of organizations, family-owned businesses, publicly traded companies, private equity-backed organizations. Along the way, I went back to school because nothing in my music education translated well. I spent time back in the business school world for both leadership and accounting and MBA, and then later my doctorate, focusing specifically on organizational health or cultural alignment, as we might talk about in the scape of leadership. So that's where you mentioned some of the peer-reviewed research and science that's been in there. But at my core, I've been an operator for the last 30 years, operating organizations all over North America, up to maybe at times 4,000 employees and $750 million in financial stewardship. Today, I spend my time working with organizations, specifically with organizations that recognize that leadership isn't just simply about pulling levers to move green to yellow to red lights on their dashboard, right? Mm-hmm. That the real superpower is in their people, that systems, you got to have them. Data, you got to have them. But that's just the bare minimum. It's what do we do next to make the sustainably high performance?
Oh, that's great stuff. It's interesting. I love the breadth that you've worked with. I think that's always good when you start with kind of small mom and pops, but you've gone to very large organizations. And there's one quote that stuck with me for a very long time is like, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah, Peter Drucker. Yeah, I love that. And unfortunately, so many people have read that book, but culture is a squishy word, right? Let's just leave that to the HR team. And we're just going to focus on moving the needle because people's bonus plans or their exit strategies don't focus around culture, but culture is really what drives it. We can maybe talk about this later, and I'm not yet ready to reveal the release, I guess that's a better word, the science I'm doing right now, but I'm finding that somewhere around 30% of what an organization spends in their labor expense line item on their P&L is directly attributed to their culture. And this might be things like we're having to hire people at a premium rate because the people that we had at the more nominal rate have left our organization, right? Or we're paying stay bonuses, or we're paying just opportunity cost losses due to employee churn, right? And so in a reality, if somebody's really focused on data and metrics, they could solve for culture challenges around accountability and trust, which again are squishy, maybe subjective kind of measures. But that could you could give everybody a 10% raise and still have the extra percent of that drive right towards your bottom line.
All right, I just want to repeat this for everybody here is, look, your bottom line can be impacted positively by focusing on culture. And I don't know if it's sometimes hard to hear because it's squishy, like you said, squishy, but I will simply say, and I think you would agree with this, is when you have trust built in your organization. And when I don't like using the word toxic, but that's probably the best word for it, where you have an organization that is not functioning well. I'll try to avoid the toxic thing as a label, but it's not functioning optimally. And I think for me, I'm always like, so the leader goes, so the company goes. And that's where you can build culture. And one thing I try to stress with everyone is that leadership can come from any level. You don't need just the title that's got a C in it to be a leader. There are people on the manufacturing lines. There are people who are in shipping and receiving. There are people who show leadership in all those different areas. And those are the people who can step in and help change the culture.
Yeah, 100%. John Maxwell says just that, right? That leadership is a measure of influence, not position, right? And honestly, if you're a leader that is trying to rely upon the title on your business card to give you authority, then you've really missed the opportunity. Simon Sinek recently had said too that you could be a founder, you could be a CEO, but at best, that alone makes you a manager. You manage businesses, you lead people. Leadership is about relationships, right? It's not about having this great strategy that you have, this vision that you've cast and trying to drive execution. That's management. That's not leadership. Leadership is building the trust, building the accountability, those again, sometimes subjective measures that have very real, tangible consequences if you do or do not do them well.
I think we can both agree that you need a strategy, right? It can't all just be culture and look, we have muffins and we have, there has to be strategy along with it. And I think I don't know the right way to say this, but I'm kind of curious to ask it to you, is like, what though is the influence then on strategy of culture? Because even though maybe it's 30% of where you should spend your time, if you don't have it, it will impact everything else.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to do that. I've developed some frameworks that help organizations manage, because culture management becomes behaviors, right? And so I would say the strategy, obviously, it's what you want, right? How do you want collaboration to exist? Do you want psychological safety? Do you want people to be able to challenge the status quo? And I'll use that just as a simple example. I had recently posted, I think on LinkedIn or something, an infographic that talked about where people will initially express a concern and they find out really quickly that's not allowed here. And so then they move to silence. And somehow people in leadership titles will think that the silence is agreement. And really the silence is dissent. The silence is dissent itself, because it's. I know somebody who recently did a workplace organization, the annual survey for their company, and the very last question, bravest thing I've ever seen on an employee survey, was the question was, do you think that this survey will actually matter in the organization? Something to that effect. And this person was in HR and had access to the back end, and that was by far the lowest rated question. And what's funny is this is a large but values-based nonprofit. These are people that are here because they believe in the mission. And yet there's still bureaucracy and politics that infiltrate in to a point where people have disengaged. And taking it back, I think there's just this disconnect that we don't get where strategy then moves to execution. And as I shared, like the idea of collaboration, it's one thing to allow people to say something. It's a second level, maybe, right? I'm just making up levels here, but maybe a second level to push the issue, right? It's the emotional awareness as a leader to say, okay, I'm in a room here and I'm trying to get feedback and I'm not getting any. Why is that? Or people are agreeing with me too quickly. How come there isn't at least one dissenting opinion? Or somebody says, hey, I like where you're going, but this way may have some unintended consequences. Here's a blind spot. Could we look at it from this angle to get to the same thing? We don't create that environment to do that, which means at the lowest levels of the organization, we need to teach people how to say, I'm not sure if that's the right way to go. And that takes a real strong ego check from everybody. Like you said, a department or a floor manager, all the way up to anybody that's got a C in front of their title, needs to recognize that sometimes when people ask me a question, I take it as being questioned. And they may not mean that. And I may logically not think that, but emotionally I do. And so while I'm working on not taking offense to something that's said, what if I actually helped train the organization from the ground up on how to appropriately give constructive feedback, so we create this culture of shared beliefs and practices where challenging assumptions is not just appropriate, it's expected. And let's just try to do it in a nicer way so that we don't, kick each other in the shins all the time and create this environment, right? That way we can also then separate when is somebody resistant versus when is somebody hesitant. Yeah. We want to be able to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a certain amount of courage that the person has to have. And to be able to say, hey, raise my hand, like, I like what you're saying, but, and it's that part that's very difficult for people. And I think for me, my whole thing is that if you have the trust built in, if you've done that, then you're more likely to get some people to go up and ask. And I'll relay it to a quick story from when I was teaching. So I taught 7th and 8th grade math. And one of the things I always said is there's no stupid questions. If you don't understand something, I want to know. And this one boy raised his hand and he asked a question that I thought everybody knew at this point. I'm like, you're serious? You don't know this? And everybody in the class laughed. And I was sitting there, oh, that's not good. And you know how you take a moment to absorb it? And I said to him, look, I so appreciate you having the courage to say that you didn't understand this, because if you don't understand this, then this is going to be a very difficult class for you. And there are probably other people who don't understand it who are not willing to raise their hand. And I just want to acknowledge you having the courage to stand up here and ask that question. And it was so interesting to watch the change in because when everybody laughs, and this was 7th and 8th grade, so you're no, and
it's already a tough time.
Yeah, and he's just sitting there, but intuitively, I knew this was an important moment without really preparing for it. And but I think that it's that piece to people. It's like, you want feedback, whether you're going to like it or not is irrelevant. You want it, and you want to seek it out. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's just so important for people. So remember, you want feedback, and how you handle that feedback is critical to building the trust and building the ability for other people to raise their hand, right?
Yeah. I want to restate that again for your audience, because it's that crucial. If you handle that poorly as a leader, and you don't receive the feedback graciously, even if they threw a brick at your head with the feedback, if you don't take it graciously, your behavior is now training everybody else in the organization that feedback is not wanted, it's not accepted, and there may be repercussions for it. And so have a little bit of grace with that. And while I can coach organizations or make recommendations about how to create these cultures, recognize we always have people coming in to our organizations that are new. And they have maybe muscle memory from past organizations where they have learned for themselves that you don't speak up. I'm thinking there's not tons of evidence around this, but it suggested that the Titanic had reports, the crew on duty, that's what I'm thinking, the crew on duty had reports that there was icebergs directly in their path in advance, and they didn't even slow down. It was dismissive. And maybe different outcomes could have happened had one person broken ranks and said, hey, is there wisdom in us mitigating our risk? Should we slow down a little bit? Should we put more spotters further out? Are there some things that we could do to help mitigate the risk? That doesn't mean that in this case, the captain was sleeping, right? But when we think about an organizational or a company standpoint, it doesn't mean that the direction or the vision is wrong. You shared a story. I had a scenario where I was able to test what kind of challenger safety I had with somebody. When you talk about psychological safety, my boss I was with an organization, and my boss had announced a new initiative. And the initiative wasn't off, but the way that it was presented was taken poorly by several people. So I had several people, members of my team, come back to me and, okay, is that really what he meant? Blah, blah. And I was able to diffuse it because I had enough background with this person that I could kind of understand intentions versus delivery. And so I was able to do that. But then I came back and I'm like, hey, I need to push back on something. I know it was in a private conversation, right? But I'm like, I need to push back on this. I think something that you said came out poorly, right? Whatever words I used. And it was just this example that, look, I don't let me first make sure I understand. What was this your intentions? He's like, yes, that's exactly what it was intended. Great. Okay. Here's though is what everybody heard. And it's like,
the perception and your intention
exactly, exactly. I've resolved it with my team. So my team is good, but I had 2 other counterparts in this organization. And I'm like, I don't know that they all understood this the same way, but because I did it, number one, his ego was in check. So that was good. 2, I first tried to show that I understood where he was coming from and get that validation what the intentions were. These were basically all defensive maneuvers I was doing to ensure that he wasn't going to think I was questioning him rather than just asking him a question. And then I, in a sense, asked him permission. Hey, can I provide you some feedback? And it may not be 100% comfortable. And he was willing for that. So I tried to create, as an individual, I tried to create the environment. He also had to come to the table with the ego in the right place and the willingness to accept that. And he was appreciative and he made the adjustment and there was no challenges and the initiative was a great success for the organization. I knew that, but I don't know, I'll tell you the people that reached out to me, some of them, spoke better about it than others, right? And I'm thinking maybe if this person here would have gone directly there, that may not have been the best match. And so there's maybe some skills that we can teach. We, as much as we talk about soft skills and hiring practices, and we want high collaboration, we want high communication, where do they learn this? Because they don't learn it in business school. They don't learn it really in real life. They're not learning it in typical K through 12 education, at least here in North America.
Or watching the news or politics. Right?
Yeah,
You're not learning it there.
Yeah, social media is not helping out for sure.
No, I really want to hit this point home for people because this for me is very sticky. And this is really what I would like out of this podcast is people, if you can get something that you are able to do. So look at it this way. Bryan focused on what he had control over, right? So he came into it, and correct me if I'm getting these wrong. He came in and said, hey, look, is this your intention? Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Okay, fantastic. Now I'd like to provide you some feedback. So asking permission, right? So you said, look, I'm asking permission to give you some feedback. Okay? So the person's ego was in check. Might not have been in check. Then I'm like, what do you mean you need to give me feedback? You have no idea what that one's going to be. But you were focused on what you had control over, right? And then you said, here's what the perception was. And then it was able to work. But I think one of the things that I think is sticky for me, and I'm hoping it's sticky for other people, is you focus on what you have control over. Try to understand their perception, right? Is this what you were trying to intend? Oh, yeah, of course, that's what I'm trying to intend. The perception is this. And asking permission then to give feedback. And you have to be prepared for all the different answers. What do you mean you need to give me feedback? Could be defensive. It could be something else. It's like, look, I'm genuinely interested in making the organization better. And I just thought it would be important that you hear this, that some people didn't perceive it that way. So you have to be prepared for that. So you were talking about teaching people these skills. And I think that's the piece, right? Is either role playing or however you normally do it. These are the things that I think are really important for just this situation. And this isn't in particularly even, let's say, an even hotly contested kind of situation. This was, hey, you thought you were saying this, but it was perceived as this, right? And so these are low, I would call, let's call it low intensity to build this kind of trust that you're talking about and this kind of communication. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Question. So why do we keep repeating? Why do we keep repeating these patterns if we know better? Well, I like when you go.
Yeah. Business would be so much easier if it wasn't for all the people involved. Right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's like we can have all the best systems. We can have all the right dashboards. We can be tracking our leading indicators that lead to our lagging indicators. We can metricize every critical facet of our business. And then we inject people, either on the development side, like developing the product, service, whatever, the delivery, or even on the customer side. People become the X factor. And it's how people respond, how people react, where they're coming from, right? Just the diversity in how people perceive the world around them. When that comes into our midst, the challenge when people are either unknowingly oblivious to the people factor, or they're knowingly disconnected from it because that's either HR's job, learning and development's job, or I'm just here to move the organization forward, right? And they're just willfully disconnecting from the people side of the business. We get this just cycle. And you mentioned Peter Drucker and the culture eats strategy for breakfast. Again, we get these things logically, but working with people is messy. And it doesn't show up well on a dashboard. And in fact, if we think we're looking at a dashboard, maybe like a vehicle, we need to look up through the windshield regularly. And I do a lot of work in private equity. And so you have bankers that are the sponsors, the financial, the purse string people, right? And they come from an environment where everything is highly, highly metrics driven. And I don't fault that. But when they interact with operators, there's oftentimes a challenge. Number one, because they don't speak the same language, right? Operators, especially founders that are just in the day-to-day, they don't typically speak bankers. So sometimes there's a disconnect between there. But it's this idea that how are we doing today on these 32 metrics compared to where we were the same time last quarter or last year? A culture focus says, where do I want to be in the same time next year? And what do I have to do today that will get us there? I'm a hockey fan, and Wayne Gretzky, he very famously said, I never skate to where the puck is going or where the puck is. I skate to where the puck is going. And if we take all the good stuff that we've been doing in business for the last 2.5 decades, all this data-driven decision-making, but then we add to that a cultural element and not dismiss it as something that our HR partners need to focus on, morale and whatever, just minimize it to maybe a few key things, right? We recognize the people dynamic and say, what can we do today to build capacity? What can we do today to build leadership influence? What can we do today to build organizational accountability and trust? Those kinds of conversations don't often get had. They maybe do if you score poorly on an annual survey, and okay, we're going to find 2 or 3 things, and maybe we'll up our contributions to the 401k or whatever, and we just try to resolve it and push it away. But there's a lot of real life things that happened, especially after COVID-19. A lot of times people thought this culture thing was just for millennials, like especially late millennials and Gen Z, that it was generational. But the data shows differently, that what corporate America and what business called the Great Resignation coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic was really the great reevaluation. People started asking way different questions. Does my work matter? Do the people I work with care about me? Am I valued, or am I just simply a resource or a commodity to be used? And people started making different decisions. Unfortunately, there's so many people in positions of authority that haven't made that connection yet, that their organization pitches a brand when they try to hire somebody. Come work for us. We'll train you. We'll develop you. We'll give you opportunities for growth. We're like a big family here. And then what do we do? Oh, day one, here's the bathroom. Here's the break room. Sit down, shut up. And you've got 9 hours of online courses you now have to take to catch up with the rest of us. And then we're maybe going to check in with you twice a year for some sort of a development conversation that's really just checking a box so that we can say that we did the work, right? We're not actually fulfilling our own brand promise when it comes to our employee engagement. So that's recently did a TED Talk, and we talked about the invisible workplace. And it's this idea that it's not quiet quitting. That is just barely scratching the surface, right? Using that as kind of a common buzzword, right? There's an epidemic of loneliness that's going on. And especially when we start layering in AI tools and other things, it's just increasing that. A recent workplace study showed that it was something like 80+%. I can't remember the statistic right off the top of my head, but 80+% of individuals who regularly use AI tools for work are reporting increased feelings of loneliness or decreased human connection at work. And while AI may improve productivity, it's weakening human relationships. And maybe this is for later conversation, but what are these things that AI can't replace that we still need humans for? But if humans aren't engaged, they just feel that they're invisible. It's like, why am I here?
Oh, yeah. It's so interesting that I hadn't heard that people are lonely at work. And that really kind of, have to tell you, that one kind of hit me. And I can see that. And it's funny. I look at some of the things, and I want you probably do similar things. But one of the things I always did is I never ate alone. Like I never ate lunch alone. And one of the things what I always wanted to do, because at the time I was doing a lot of corporate training, is I would want to go sit with the people after they had taken my class and just kind of sit down with them over lunch and talk to them. And I'm like, okay, look, no survey, nothing. Tell me truthfully. You could tell me the truth. Did that work for you or not work for you? And what would work if it did work well for you? I like the one question I use is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate it? And they're, a solid 9. Okay, what would have made it a 10? Because if they just go like, okay, so 10. Now nothing? You mean you're trying to tell me nothing would change? Yeah. Or are you just saying that because you're worried you're going to hurt my feelings? I'll take it, but I'm ready for the improvement. And I think it's important, particularly now that you said this piece about loneliness that I didn't think about, is we get caught up in the, I've just got to get this thing done, and I'm head down and I'm working on my computer and I'm not really talking to people. And maybe I'll talk to somebody briefly with a coffee machine, but sitting down with people and really connecting with them, I just think it's just so important. And like I said, for me, I'm never eating lunch alone. If I'm working somewhere, I want to sit down, get to know people, get their perspective, see if I can understand that better, because that'll make me either a better manager, leader, trainer, whatever the role is that you're going to be in. And I've sat down with guys on the operating line, and I've talked to the VP of quality. I'm like, hey, look, I'd like to sit down with you because everyone's telling me what you want come out of this training, and I'd rather hear it directly from you. So it's not a game of telephone. So yeah, I think these are things that are important. But again, that's my personality, right? Yeah. And I think this is one of these things that you speak to that is outside of many people's comfort zones, right? So how do you draw out some of these people who are, let's say, not inclined to do those kind of things? Or are there some strategies you can share maybe that help draw people to this idea of giving meaningful feedback and engaging?
Yeah, it's interesting. So and unfortunately, I'd love to. I can't quote the neuroscientist that's doing this work right now. Her name, it's right on tip of my tongue. I can't come up with it. Maybe we could put it in show notes or something if I can remember it. But we've got these classical ideas of introvert and extrovert. And I even see it on personality assessments. My wife's an industrial organizational psychologist, so she designs those, right? And a lot of them that are out there, they'll talk about extroversion. Version has actually less to do with our comfort level socially and more to do with how we process the world around us. It's actually closer to ADHD and other things. I'm by these definitions, I'm classically introverted. I don't need like the to be around lots of people, and I can burn out pretty quick. Now, I've developed coping mechanisms. I've developed strategies for mixers and after-hour events and things where I need to go mingle with people and how I navigate through that. But the reality from a brain level is I'm processing everything simultaneously. I could be having a conversation with you, but whether I want to or not, I'm also listening to the two conversations behind me. And so you take everything in. So you burn out the synapses faster than you would if you were focused one-to-one, where a truck could drive through the banquet hall and you would miss it because you're so locked in. And so when we look at that, we almost need to separate it. People could be socially uncomfortable, and those are just maybe skill sets that they haven't developed. Then we could have people that are still socially very competent, but they're going to be divided between the introvert and the extrovert. And that quiet reflective, we need to give time for that. And so when you ask the question, like, how can we get some of these people more engaged? I think about a couple of ways. One, are we actually teaching these skills? And meaning both from a meeting moderator as well as a meeting participant. Maybe the meeting moderator is, hey, let's ask a question. And then it feels kind of almost school teachery, but say, hey, let's just sit on this for 30 seconds. And then I'd love to hear your feedback. So, and you have to say, okay, no talking for 30 seconds. And that gives people that maybe want to process their thoughts a little bit before they say something an opportunity. that also preps you as a moderator to make sure that when you've got that one person that wants to jump in and dominate the conversation, that you're actually forcing them to pause. Maybe a second skill in there is to bring that out from people when Chris isn't sharing something. And I've worked with Chris one-on-one, and I know that Chris thinks about these things deeply and has got this great thoughts and maybe unique experience from everybody else. I may ask Chris, what are your thoughts on this? I'd love to hear your perspective. So there's some tangible things that we can do, but maybe there's some reason that person's not talking. And so then there's also an opportunity to follow up after the meeting. Hey, I noticed you didn't say anything. I could see your wheels were spinning. What are your thoughts? And then the follow-up question, help me understand why you didn't feel comfortable in the moment sharing that. Because they may say that, hey, Bryan, I know that you can take it if I push back, but I don't know, Susie here in the room, right? I would have had to go against her idea and she can't handle that. And that helps me then as a leader be more aware of interpersonal dynamics that I may not see when everybody reports to me on an org chart. I may not be fully aware of the peer dynamics that come in there. And so these exercises provide us more data that we can then act on in a human way.
Yeah. I think I really like the idea of personal follow-up. It's kind of like when I was cheating when I go to lunch with people. I sit down, I get to know them a little bit. You're just kind of building rapport, and it's not even like manipulative. I genuinely am interested in how different people see things than from what I do. And then you get to a point where you're comfortable and go, okay, now would you be willing to give me some feedback? Like, how did that work and what not work? And what would make you more comfortable next time? I like that idea. Say, what could I do next time, maybe in the class, to make it more comfortable for you to ask a question? I really like that idea, or in the next meeting to make it so you're doing that. As someone, I competed in some speech contests. And one of the things I always think is the most powerful thing you can do is to pause. And I'll give you a perfect example. There was a guy I was working with, and this guy was brilliant. And he was a fast talker. And he felt like people didn't listen to him because he talked so he never took a breath. So you didn't have a chance to absorb the information he was doing. And I'm sitting there, like, and in the meeting, I'm like, but he's really saying some stuff but it's going so fast, I can't get it all down. And I had a one-on-one with him. I'm like, here, tell me what you're trying to say. And he's talking, and I said, I'm going to share something with you. And I called this. I go, you're very lucky because my wife is a fast processor and you're a fast processor. So I'm very familiar with it. But a lot of people are not comfortable with that, right? And I think I used your phrase. I was like, are you open to me giving you some feedback? And he's like, sure. And I said, look, talk to your point, and then you're going to have to take a moment to let people absorb it. And he went, I have been doing this for 30 years and no one has ever told me that. And I could probably call him up today and he'd be like, Chris, yeah. It's one of those moments. Like, I think one of the other things that you can understand is that if you approach feedback from, I am genuinely trying to make things better for you, and for the organization as a whole, but for you, if this is an improvement opportunity for you, like if you genuinely come to them as opposed, geez, you need to slow down, it can shut people off. So it's these dynamics with people. I like the way you said it. It's like you can have these great ideas for culture, but you also have to understand the dynamics. Like you said, the Susie and the Sally may have some other kind of conflict. There could have been something at home. You don't know what's going on with people, but if you take that quiet moment and speak to them, I think that's really powerful. So again, I hope listeners talk to people, right? One, they might be experiencing loneliness, right? Two, they may have something going on and they just need to share with someone like, oh, look, I'm sorry, my head was out of this because my husband was just in the hospital, almost had a heart attack, like that kind of thing. Yep. And you understand that, and you're building more of that rapport with people as you show that you care about them, and as opposed to just the strategy. Did you hit your numbers, right?
100%. I was thinking about that as you were sharing. Rapport is necessary, right? And we talk about this in the culture recovery framework, where you build organizational accountability and then individual accountability before you get to trust. Because accountability is the observed behaviors, and then trust is how I process those behaviors, right? Trying to understand what your intentions are. HR professionals will say, look, don't get personal with people's lives, right? And senior operators will oftentimes say that either. It's like, look, people will come and go, and if you don't need to know the name of their dog and whatnot, right? It's same thing with sales. You go in and it's like, oh, did you catch that fish on the wall? Sometimes this stuff can feel patronizing. But when you're in that employer-employee relationship, one of the best ways to build rapport is, hey, where do you see yourself going in your career with this company or elsewhere? And what can I do? What can we do today to help prepare you to be ready for those opportunities when they come down the road? By showing genuine interest in their well-being and their potential future, you're both staying out of the sometimes too personal, sometimes patronizing. Doesn't mean those things don't creep in, but you're avoiding the impression of superficiality by actually tying something that is in fact your responsibility to something that could be very meaningful to them. Because when we get it later into trust, and we have both capability trust and moral trust, it's regardless of what somebody says to us when they give us critical feedback, we may first acknowledge and say, okay, the way they said that sucked. That didn't feel good. But we instantly make a judgment. Did they say that for our best interests, or did they say that for something else? And we make that in a split second, regularly, unconsciously. And to get to that level where the answer's more often than not, I believe that they have my best interest at heart. We need to demonstrate that through our behaviors. And just for anybody listening, and I want to tie this in because you talked about like sitting down at lunch with people. These things apply whether you have an in-office team or whether you have a distributed team as well. It's that sense of presence. And if I were to list the 2 or 3 leadership behaviors that AI can't replace and that are really, quite frankly, missing from the human component that we have, one of those that I would mention is presence. Even to a degree that I was on a call with somebody in a past employment situation. I was working from home at the time. I can't remember if they were in an office or whatnot, but we're sitting here having a meeting. And we only had one meeting a month to get everything that we needed to talk about one-on-one. And I could tell this person was like looking down and answering messages on Teams or whatever, and just kind of nodding. And I completely changed subjects and just started talking about something random, and is still kind of nodding. And I ended up calling him out and we laughed about it. But it was like, look, if you can't be present in our time, in person or remote, then we need to do this. It's when I do workshops, I regularly will ask the question, who thinks that it's appropriate as a leader to have an open door policy? Everybody raises their hand. They're so proud. I've got an open door policy. And I like, stop it. Don't do that. There's a difference between being available and being approachable. What we mean with an open door policy is that anybody can come in and not feel like they have to script out what they're going to say or filter it because you only want to hear certain things. That's what's intended. It's not really effective when you're working on something and somebody comes in and keeps interrupting you, right? That's helping them, but you're also now failing in your other responsibilities. Have office hours, have your schedule available, and people can book time on your calendar so that you can mentally prepare, right? Or you have the confidence enough to say, hey, I'd love to talk to you. I'm right in the middle of something heavy. Can you give me 15 minutes and I'll come find you and we'll sit down. And then you're able to finish what you're doing, reset, refocus. So you're not still on that same track and you're switch tasking back and forth. You go get that person, then you can sit down knee to knee in 3D or on video or something like that and have that conversation versus we try to just spread ourselves so thin and we lack the presence that then leads ultimately to the rapport that you're talking about to have these engagements be meaningful.
Hello, friends. Thanks for listening. A Squared Lamp Groups powers this podcast. Their memberships are tax-deductible donations that directly support their work developing people and organizations. But just for you, they're offering podcast listeners a special 40% off coupon code to join. Your benefits as a member include additional resources, perks, and access that you can use all year, including an additional 30 minutes of bonus podcast content for every episode. Simply use the code 4listeners at checkout. That's the number 4, all caps, listeners, at checkout. They also are giving our listeners free gifts to use now. Go to their website, asquaredlamps.org/podcast, and download your free My Success Course of Action worksheet. There is no cost, registration, or sales pitch involved. Just click it and save. Use it to work on something significant to you this month, maybe even something that sparks interest from today's podcast. Then click to join our free but private Stop Digging Podcast LinkedIn group, where the conversation continues between you, the hosts, and our guests. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. And now, back to the program.
Oh, I really like that idea of being approachable or available, right? Versus come in whenever you want. Doesn't matter. If you think about it, it breaks your chain of conversation, your thought process. If you're in the middle of something and you say, look, I want to talk to you, but now is not a good time. And the other part to that, what I think is important, is people understand then I'm interested, but I have this, right? And I'm going to acknowledge that you want to talk to me, but you're going to acknowledge that right now is not the best time. And if you think about it, like just thinking about it now off the top of my head, that's another way that you're building kind of a good company culture. My time is valuable. Your time is valuable. Let's set up a time where we both can work on it.
Yes.
I think that little scenario that you gave is really important. So remember, you want to be available to people. And I like the idea of having office hours. If you think about like professors, they couldn't handle if there are 300 kids in their class and people are just streaming in and they're trying to get out their paper or whatever that helps them with their career. And people are starting to come in. I have office hours. They're from this time to this time. Please feel free to book any time on my calendar, right? During those office hours. So I think these important for the idea of setting a boundary and saying it's okay for you to set a boundary too. I think these are the kind of things that subconsciously build rapport. Now that I'm talking with you, I never really processed it that way. Mm-hmm. But I really love that story. And I just have to loop back on one thing. So you and I are on the different ends. I literally got tested when I was a kid because my mom thought I was deaf because when I was doing something, I could do one thing really well. If you give me 2 things, 3 things, they're all crap. I am really good about focusing on things to the point where I'm literally like deaf. Like my mom, I was been calling your name for 10 minutes. Like she walked in on me and I'm like, why are you yelling at me? I've been calling your name for 10 minutes. I didn't hear you. Took me to the doctor and they're like, he's really focused. So for me, it's the way that I'm hardwired. I'm aware of it now, but literally go deaf. And I have to tell people sometimes, look, if you're talking to me and I'm sitting at my computer and can you just tap me on the shoulder? Because I literally will not hear you.
Yeah.
Like I had to set that up for people because, you walked past me and didn't say anything to me. And I'm like, I'm just letting you know, this is the kind of person I am. You're going to have to get my attention.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You're setting expectations, just like we talked about setting boundaries, right? When we have boundaries for ourselves, we need to encourage people to have boundaries because I may walk over to somebody's desk because I've got this idea. They need to be able to say, look, I'm in the middle of something. I know I work for you. I know you signed my paycheck, but I need to tell you no temporarily, right? Because I got to finish this thing. Just with that also goes with the communication. Too often people lean on that positional authority level of leadership rather than recognizing the human connection realities or the mantle, really the responsibility. And so they will come into, especially new leaders, right? Because depending on, we don't know what kind of leadership modeling they've had, and they haven't maybe decades of experience to learn for themselves what works and what doesn't. But I've even seen people with 40, 50 years of senior level experience, and they'll look back and it's just like, they believe that everybody needs to accommodate them because I'm the boss, I'm the leader. And it's like, no, the org chart isn't top heavy, right? It's bottom heavy. And this person supports the entire organization, not the entire organization supports that person. And so when you then, and I've done this exercise with a workshop with a group of leaders, and I'll just say, hey, give me somebody that can't multitask or can't switch task. And they'll have to think about it. I'm like, how do you work with that person that's different? I'll get a name from that person and say, okay, it's Steve. And then okay, who's somebody who absolutely can ping pong back and forth? Bob. And I will ask them, when you have your one-on-ones with them, and sometimes we have to stop there because they're not meeting with their people, right? And that becomes its own challenge. But how do you structure your meeting differently with Steve than you do with Bob, or whatever names I gave? And they're like, oh, I've got my flow and this is what I do with everybody. I'm like, oh, you're missing the point. You as the leader are the one that's supposed to be adaptable. That's part of your responsibility. With Steve, we can have let's say Bob, the one that ping pongs, we can just have a conversation and sees where it goes. But with Steve, I'm actually going to send Steve an agenda the night before with the items that I want to discuss. Because if I don't, the meeting will not be productive because he'll be so worried about what I'm trying to get at, or he wants a second to process the question versus giving him an opportunity to think about it and come to a meeting prepared. That's the adaptability in leadership that we need to have and recognize, again, people come from these different backgrounds. They've got different learning styles. What do I need to do to help not them be like me or help them understand my way of doing things? Rather, I'm the one that I use the metaphor being a chameleon. You don't change who you are, but you bring out different attributes about yourself to better accommodate the environment that you have in these one-on-one relationships with your team.
I think I can't agree with you more. And I love the phraseology. Think about it. If you're a leader, I guess that would be a great question for a leader is, should people adapt to your style or should you adapt to their style? Would be just a great question to ask and see them go, they should adapt to my style. I'm the leader. I'm like, yep, there's 300 people in your organization and they all have different kinds of styles and these kind of things, and say, hey, look, this is the way I prefer to work. But if you have a way that you like to work, let's figure that out, particularly if you're going to end up in one-on-one conversations with people, as opposed to you need to just adapt to my style. I know myself, and I'm, again, a little different than you. I am like, the bigger the crowds of people, the more fun I have. I enjoy kind of this big get-togethers. Mm-hmm. My wife is probably a little bit more like you. She's like, I prefer one-on-one, finding one person, talking to them for 20, 30 minutes, and then maybe naturally moving on to another person who I singularly talk to for 20, 30 minutes. And me, I'm just floating around like a social butterfly, just kind of having a good time. And those are very hard for, say, other people to adapt to. But for me, I'm like, I knew this is how my wife likes doing things. I like doing things differently. So you have to learn how to adjust your style if you consider yourself one of the leaders in your relationship or in business. It's like, okay, I know how I work. I know how this person works, and I want the best out of them. So I'm going to try to meet them where they are. And I think that's just a very powerful thing for people to kind of chew on a little bit. And I'm willing to bet with certain egos, there's certain people that would have a very tough time saying, I need to adapt.
But I think you said something that's worthwhile. Having that true interaction, right? The dialogue. Because at the end of the day, it's not, you may have an organization of 300 or 3,000, but it's not like you interact with each of those people every single day. Mm-hmm. Typically, you're somewhere between 8 to maybe 16 direct reports. And so it's not like you need to do this for every single person in your organization. You do, however, have a responsibility to train others to be adaptable as well. That becomes part of leadership training rather than managerial metrics moving control training. But in your span of control of whatever, 18, 10, 15 direct reports, to have that interaction, right? It's, let's say if I'm the senior leader, yes, I do believe it's ultimately my responsibility. It's my mantle and stewardship to accommodate their style. But that doesn't mean that me sharing with them what some of my natural tendencies are along the way as appropriate, not that they need to conform, but more or less as a preventative measure so that they don't take offense. I had a vice president that worked for me, and one of my natural tendencies is to balance somebody. And I don't necessarily know why. Sometimes my wife will think it's like just a contrary motion kind of thing, but somebody will come in and they're way too chill about like a big screw up or something. And I'm like, oh, time to turn up the heat and build some urgency. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, somebody will come in and they think that the world's crumbling, sky's falling, we're all doomed. And I'm like, look, this was a $10,000 problem. It's not a big deal. I actually had a vice president push back on me because we were doing, it was like a quarterly review or semi-annual review. And I always asked for feedback as well. So it's like, hey, look, you're being evaluated, but I'm also asking you to evaluate me, because we all always want to do this, right? No different than you sitting down with people after a session and asking their feedback. This person called me out saying that she felt diminished when my natural tendency was to balance out, because it was really a big deal to her that there was this problem. And I'm just devolving it to, okay, it's just a $10,000 problem, right? And this was a tens of millions of dollars of profit business. So this wasn't a material thing, but it was important to her. And by trying to devalue, or not trying to, my scope was to put it in perspective of the business as a whole, because that was my responsibility, but that wasn't hers. And I unintentionally diminished her. And she called me out on that. And so now I've actually, and I absolutely work on that. I work on trying to not do that. But as I work with people and we get to know each other, I may actually share with them that, just like you shared with me, that sometimes you're so focused that blinders, earplugs, noise canceling headphones, I mean, everything, right? But I would share that, look, sometimes I have a tendency to balance out or play the opposite. And I never want that to feel like it's a reflection of you. Go ahead and call me out on it, right? Just point out to me in the moment, and then we can talk through it. And maybe people don't, but it's at least it's an honesty level that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's fair for them to share what, like, their perspective, and you also share yours. This is my preferred way of doing it, but I see that, and it kind of loops back to when that first story that you said. If you think about it, and you said, all right, you seem to be very upset about this. Let's take a moment and think about it from a larger perspective. Was there a phraseology that you could have maybe done to meet them at where they were and then balance, right? Like, kind of talks to that point that you were saying about meeting people where they are, and, hey, is this what you're feeling? Is this what your intention was, that first story that you said? So what's going on? It seems to be very serious. Okay, well, all right, let's just take a moment and let's think about this. And let's look at it from a broader perspective. I can understand why you feel this way, but maybe, and then you could do the balancing, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I have to tell you, I am genuinely enjoying this conversation. And we got 5 minutes left. So,
I won't take up that 5 minutes, but I want to add to what you were just talking about, that phraseology. One of the things I've learned when that happens now is I need to follow up with a question, because my natural tendency was to solve it, and they may not be coming to me to seek a solution. And even if they were asking me to do a solution, I'm now answering a problem and I'm creating a dependency relationship. I want them to solve the problem. And so I started asking the question, especially if I could just immediately see that it was something that was immaterial. I'm like, hey, just so I can help you work through this, right? Because I'm not saying I'm going to answer this for you. I'm not saying help me solve this for you. I'm saying so I can help you work through this. I see a lot of frustration. Is this because of maybe something that happened with a person, or is it maybe, do you have any anxiety, like how this is going to reflect on you? Walk me through what's driving this level of concern. And then that helps to move them from emotional to more like rational or logical thinking, which then allows me to know what path, because maybe I do need to help guide them towards a solution because they've thought through everything and they can't find a way out. Or maybe it is, like we talked about, it's actually just repositioning it because they think that it's more material than it is. Or maybe they're just like, no, I'm sorry, I just needed to vent. This is so-and-so, and they're doing the right thing. Instead of going to their team and venting and sharing negativity down, I may be the only person that they can just come in, slam the door, talk it out, or scream it out, or whatever, knowing that they're not hurting their own team. And I can't just, number one, I don't have all the answers anyway, but I can't assume that they're coming to me because they think I'm some sort of a guru. I need to ask a follow-up question or two before we start digging into details.
I have to tell you, that's beautiful. I really, again, this is a good, I hope you all stayed here to the end, because that's the little juicy tidbits here, is to ask that clarifying question. And what I really liked was, hey, how can I help you work through this? So you're not creating, I am the solution person for every problem that you have, is such a better positioning than, hang on, I'll figure this out. No, like saying, well, let me work through. So asking those clarifying questions, I think that is just a beautiful strategy. Again, listeners, you've got a lot of ideas here that were very sticky for me anyway. And this is why, again, why I love doing this podcast is I'm really hoping that from these conversations with people who are involved in leadership within organizational development, that you can hear something that you can go, wow, maybe I could do that better. Maybe, I could take that. I could use that. So we've only got a few minutes left. So I'd like you to tell us a little bit of how people get a hold of you. What's the best if they want to reach out to you? And I know you have a lot of things we didn't touch on, but the conversation was going so smoothly that we'll have to maybe have you back. All right. So tell us a little bit, again, how people can reach out to you, some of the maybe books you have. I know that you have written books, so please share that.
Yeah, I'd say probably the best book that applies to what we talked about today. It's a book called Toxicity. Let's finally do something about it. It's available on Amazon internationally, and then here in the States, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, several other retailers. It's also an audiobook for people who prefer that format. As far as connecting with me, you like that? As far as people connecting with me, I'm on all the socials, LinkedIn under my name. Everything else is under my business name, Clear Day Strategies. And the website is cleardaystrategies.com. Something maybe for your audience, if they're concerned about toxicity, and I'll leave with this. We use that word toxicity, and you were cautious to use that word because it's probably overused. And I agree with that. That's why I wrote a book about it. That toxicity isn't just about style, it's about intentions. It's a self-interested leader, not an pro-organization leader, meaning that they will manipulate to get what they want or what they expect at the expense of others. And so if you have those if you're concerned about toxicity, even if you're not, there's probably some value in taking the culture quiz. My wife, again, who's an industrial organizational psychologist, we put together a quiz that allows you to go through about 20 questions, takes about 2 minutes, and can provide you some flags, yellow flags, maybe orange flags, to let you know where you may have some vulnerabilities in your organization. And you can go to that. It's free for anyone. It's culturequiz.cleardaystrategies.com.
Okay. Clear Day Strategies is the website. Okay. Bryan Hughes is our guest. Fantastic, Bryan. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, listeners, for staying with us. If you made it all the way to the end, some great stuff there at the end. So I'm glad you made it. Maybe even in the bonus content for our A Squared Lamp Groups group, we can do the culture quiz. I think that might be an interesting thing to play around with. Again, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month on our community podcast. Hi, this is Chris, podcast team coordinator for A Squared Lamp Groups. Thank you for listening and subscribing to the Stop Digging Community Podcast. Keep the conversation going. Search for the Stop Digging group on LinkedIn and don't miss out on our next episode.